We spend literally thousands of hours of our lives in school. But have you ever really stopped and asked, what's it all for? What is school really for? Well, it turns out the answer is way more complicated and honestly a lot more controversial than you might think. So let's get into it.
Okay, so picture this. It's 2019. All around the world, thousands of students, totally inspired by Greta Thunberg, just walk out of school. Think about that. They're literally ditching their education, the one thing that's supposed to set them up for the future, all in the name of saving that future. It's this wild paradox, right? One teacher even said it made them question their whole role because you've got these kids who are always told to just sit down and be quiet, and they decided that, no, real learning meant standing up and making some noise.
And that tension really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. So what is school's main job? Is it to create orderly citizens who just follow the rules? Or is it to create critical thinkers who challenge things? Conformity or rebellion? That's the fundamental conflict we're going to unpack right now.
All right, so first up, let's talk about the official story. You know the one I'm talking about. It's a version of school that we hear from politicians, the one written in all those school mission statements. The idea that school is just an obvious, unquestionable public good.
In sociology, this perspective has a name. It's called functionalism. And the idea is pretty simple, actually. It sees society as a body. And schools are like a vital organ, like the heart or the lungs. They perform these really essential functions that keep everything running smoothly, creating a stable, unified society. It's a pretty optimistic take, right? So what are these all-important functions?
Well, according to sociologists like Emil Durkheim, there are a few big ones. First, school acts like a society in miniature. It's where we learn all the shared values, the rules of cooperation and discipline, so we can all, get along. Second, it's supposed to give us the specialized skills we need for a complex modern economy, basically preparing us for real jobs. And third, and this is a big one from a guy named Talcott Parsons, school promotes individual achievement. The idea here is that it doesn't matter who your parents are or where you came from. In school, you're judged by the same rules as everybody else. It's a true meritocracy. Or, at least that's the theory.
But what if that's not the whole story? What if there's another purpose to school, a hidden one that's less about creating a level playing field and a whole lot more about making sure the game stays rigged?
And this is where we get to the real debate. On one side, you've got that ideal we just talked about. School as the great equalizer, a path to opportunity for everyone. But on the other side, you have a much darker, more critical view, that school is actually a great divider, that it's a system designed to pass social inequality down from one generation to the next.
So this critical view is summed up perfectly by something called the correspondence principle. These two sociologists, Bowles and Gintis, they argued it's no accident that school feels so much like a job. Just think about it for a sec. The relationship between the principal and the teachers, it's like the manager and the employees. Teachers and students, that's the boss and the workers. It all perfectly mirrors the hierarchy of a workplace. You learn to listen to the boss, do what you're told, and whatever you do, don't question the system.
And that leads us to this huge idea, the hidden curriculum. Now this is arguably the most important thing you learn at school, but you won't find it in any textbook. It's all the unstated lessons, the values, the norms that you just kind of absorb by being in that environment.
So what exactly does this hidden curriculum teach you? Well, for one, it teaches you to know your place in the pecking order, to accept authority without asking too many questions. It teaches you that your self-worth is tied to what other people think, grades, report cards. It makes being under constant surveillance feel totally normal. Even homework, when you think about it, is just the school's discipline extending right into your home. The writer Ivan Illich put it perfectly. He said the hidden curriculum teaches you to know their place and to sit still in it.
Okay, but how does the system end up favoring some kids over others? Well, the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu came up with this brilliant concept called cultural capital. And the best way to think about it is like a backstage pass. It's all the social assets, the way you speak, the books on your shelf at home, the confidence you have, that some kids just get from their families. And since schools are, for the most part, really middle-class institutions, they naturally reward the kids who already walk in the door with this backstage pass. And if you don't have it, you can end up feeling like you just don't belong.
Okay, so we've got these two totally different stories, right? School as the great equalizer, and school as a system that just keeps inequality going. Theories are one thing, but what does the actual evidence say? Let's look at the proof in the numbers.
Yeah, let's move away from the abstract theories and get into the cold, hard facts.
Because when you look at the data, at who actually succeeds in school and who doesn't, the patterns are, well, they're undeniable, and they tell a very, very clear story.
Just take a look at this. This chart comes from a UK study, and it tells you pretty much everything you need to know. On the left, you've got kids from the poorest families. On the right, the richest. The dark bars show their test scores at just 7 years old. And look, there's already a massive 31-point gap. But then, look at the lighter bars. That's at age 11. The gap gets even wider. It's almost as if the longer kids are in school, the more their family's wealth determines how well they're going to do.
And by the time these kids are 16, well, that gap has become an absolute chasm. We're talking about a 54 percentage point difference in exam results between the richest and poorest students in that same study. Let me put that another way. 75% of the wealthiest kids got good grades. For the poorest kids, just 21%. That is not a level playing field. That's a completely different game.
So, the evidence based on social class seems pretty overwhelming, right? But this is where the story takes a really interesting and honestly unexpected turn. What happens when we look at all this data through the lens of gender?
Here's the thing. For most of the 20th century, it was pretty clear. Boys generally did better in school than girls. But then around the 1990s, something started to shift. We saw this dramatic and totally unexpected reversal. Suddenly, girls are outperforming boys, starting from a really early age, in pretty much everything: reading, writing, even things like self-confidence. And this has kicked off this whole conversation and a lot of concern about underachieving boys.
But hold on, it's not quite as simple as girls win, boys lose. Not at all. Because even though girls are getting better grades, their subject choices are still super segregated by gender. Boys are still dominating the high-paying STEM fields. We're talking engineering, computer science, all that stuff. And here's the real kicker. Once everyone leaves school, being male still gives you some major advantages in the job market. So yeah, girls might be winning in the classroom, but men are often still winning in the boardroom.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? What have we learned? Well, it seems like school is this place of deep, deep contradictions. On the one hand, it holds out this incredible promise of opportunity for everyone. But on the other hand, the reality for so many people is a system that just reinforces the inequalities that already exist, both with class and, in some really complicated ways, with gender too.
And I think this quote from the sociologist Diane Ray just hits the nail on the head. She argues that we really shouldn't be surprised that school doesn't fix society's problems, because it was never actually set up to do that. Instead, she says, it operates as an enormous academic sieve. Its real job is just to sort the winners from the losers. And it just so happens that the winners are usually the ones who are already ahead when they started.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most important question. A pretty provocative one, too. If our schools are really just a mirror, reflecting our unequal society back at us, can we ever truly fix them from the inside? Or, to create schools that give every single kid a real shot, do we first have to build a more equal world outside the classroom?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. We'll see you next time.